You're listening to Big World Network.
Accidental Passion, Episode 1, For Profit. Read by Meagan Hedin. Warning! Although there is no material subject matter within that couldn't be found in any general bookstore with no age constraint, this series is rated 18 and contains adult situations and content. It is intended for mature audiences only and should not be read if you are uncomfortable with graphic sexual intimacy. Ryan stood up from the flight planning table inside the corporate terminal at Detroit International Airport and shut his laptop cover. Flight plans in. Detroit to Santa Monica. All nice weather today, he said to Woods, smiling as he packed the laptop into its case and slung it over his shoulder. You really don't have to do this. Deanna can fly for free on the airline, and I could have caught a commercial flight, Woods replied. Ryan made a dramatic shiver as Woods mentioned commercial flight, laughing. It's the least I can do. I can't thank you enough for coming back and checking on Kim's safety. You have always been there for me, my friend. Of course I did. She's quite a girl, by the way, Woods answered, slapping a hand on Ryan's shoulder as they walked towards the briefing room exit into the small corporate lobby where Deanna was waiting for them. Seems like you have quite a girl there yourself, Ryan nodded towards Deanna, who was leafing through a magazine in a small grouping of couches and chairs. I never thought I would see the day that Woods, the original California bachelor, would get serious with a girl. Who said I was serious? She's just coming back with me on her days off for a quick visit, Woods answered defensively. Uh-huh. Think what you want, Woods laughed. Anyway, I feel better knowing Kim is safe from that psychopath. I followed him for 3 days and I don't see any sign of him having a desire to stalk her again. I imagine the arrest and unwanted excitement have waned his interest in her. As they reached Deanna, she stood up and followed them towards the double-glass doors opening to the ramp, where Ryan's small corporate jet was parked, fueled, and ready to go. Have you been able to spend any time with her yet? Walking out through the doors, they were greeted with the loud roar of a larger airliner lumbering into the sky from the nearest runway. After the noise dissipated enough and they had walked towards the open-air stairs on his jet, Ryan yelled, In a manner of speaking. Why do you always seem to be talking in code when I ask you if you are seeing her? Woods replied, stopping at the door to let Deanna climb in first. Ryan laughed but did not offer an explanation as he followed Woods into the cabin, crouching down since it wasn't large enough to stand up straight in, though the jet still sported leather interior with all the amenities. As he pulled the stairs up and in, followed by the cabin door, which he closed and latched, things became very quiet as all the loud noises of the airport and ramp were sealed out. After checking the locking pins to make sure the door was secure, Ryan worked his way forward past a small sideways-facing couch and into the cockpit's left seat in front of a small bulkhead, before strapping in and starting the engines. He looked back to make sure his 2 passengers were seated and buckled in. Aside from Kim, flying was his love and passion, and the only time he truly felt contentment in his life. Rick sat on his motorcycle, which was resting on its kickstand by the ramp fence. He watched as Ryan, Woods, and Deanna walked out to the small jet just as the large airliner climbed overhead. Not seeing a pilot join them, Rick watched intently as the door to the jet closed. A few minutes later, he could clearly make out Ryan climbing into the pilot's seat through the front windshield. What do you know, he thought to himself. A big-shot author and a pilot. He felt his blood boiling. As the first engine on the jet started to whine, he knew Kim would still want him, and needed a real man. After all, she had gone all the way to the Florida Keys to be with him for a weekend. He would be able to get that passion back with her. After starting his bike up and balancing it while kicking up the kickstand with his foot, Rick roared out of the corporate air terminal. Besides, he thought, flying really isn't that safe. I would hate for Flyboy to ever have any problems. Angela looked down at the face of the tabloid editor and smirked at his scrunched expression from reaching climax as she straddled his hips. Men always made the stupidest faces, she thought, also realizing that she probably wasn't going to reach her climax with this sweaty sex. Normally, this would be a serious issue and piss her off, but it wasn't the objective of this romp. Before his breathing began to slow, she unimpaled herself from him and slid down until she was face level with his still-hardened member, taking him in her hands and sliding the condom off. As she held him in both hands, she looked up at him, teasing him with her tongue while he was still extremely sensitive. He moaned as she looked down at her. "That was incredible, as always," he said, catching his breath. "Thank you." "My pleasure," Angela replied, still holding him. "But I do have a favor in exchange." "You truly fit the stereotype of a self-serving agent. If you weren't such a good hookup, I would kick you out now," the editor laughed. "So which client are you wanting us to pull a story on this time?" Sliding back up to his waist and grinding her wetness on his softening cock, she looked down at him and smiled. "You are too quick to assume," she said, rocking back and forth, feeling him start to grow hard again. She loved younger men. They didn't know how to please as well, but they were always quickly ready to go again. "So what then?" Feeling that he was hard enough, Angela reached between her legs where she was straddling his hips, found him, and guided him back inside of her. Not moving, she just looked down at him and smiled. "I have a picture I think you might like to purchase from an anonymous source. Let's just say I think this publicity will actually help this client and create some buzz about him. Not to mention it will put some cash in my pocket." "You are evil. What picture?" he asked, arching his hips up, trying to get her to move while resting his hands on her hips. For the second time in 10 minutes, Angela removed him from inside of her by sitting up on her knees and reaching above his head to the end table drawer. Retrieving the picture of Ryan and the mystery girl under the desk, she handed it to him. "Isn't that Ryan what's-his-name, the author? Who's the chick?" he asked in rapid succession. Before she could reply, he added, "Damn, he's speaking to a full room. Talk about keeping your composure. Hats off to this guy." "I have no idea who the girl is, but it doesn't matter. This headline writes itself," she said as she positioned herself back over his hips. "This might be worth $1,000 or so." "What?" Angela asked incredulously. "A picture like that? That's worth $20,000 at least. It's going to give your crappy rag checkout newspaper so much publicity when he has to go on every late-night show to explain himself." "You have a point. Maybe I can go $5,000. Reaching under herself between her legs, Angela grabbed hold of him and squeezed lightly, but firm enough to make him wince in that borderline zone between pain and pleasure. 10, she said flatly before releasing her grip a little and guiding him back into her again. Maybe she was going to be able to get off tonight after all.
This has been a presentation of Big World Network. Visit us on bigworldnetwork.com for more free weekly series, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.